When a 65-year-old virgin walks down the aisle to marry a 29-year-old stranger, is it love, lunacy, or something mysterious? Some women spend their whole lives waiting for a man who will never come. Sandra Wilfred stopped waiting at the age of 65. But on the very night she finally wore white, she couldn't stand on her feet. And the reason? You are about to find out. Sandra Wilfred had ironed her beautiful wedding dress 4 times. Not because it was wrinkled, it wasn't. The ivory silk hung perfectly on the back of her bedroom door, glowing softly in the amber light of her small Baltimore apartment. She ironed it because her hands needed something to do. Because if she stopped moving, she'd have to face the truth. At 65 years old, after a lifetime of waiting for a love that never came, she was about to marry a stranger. A 29-year-old stranger. A dangerous one. The iron hissed as she pressed the hem, steam curling around her wrinkled fingers. Her reflection stared back from the dark window. Silver hair pulled into a modest bun, deep brown skin creased with decades of smiles she'd given to everyone but herself, eyes that had seen too many empty nights. She'd been a nurse for 42 years. She'd held the hands of dying patients, whispered comfort to grieving families, cleaned wounds that would never fully heal. But she'd never been touched the way a woman dreams of being touched. Never been kissed with hunger, never felt wanted. "You're a fool, Sandra," she whispered to her reflection. But fools, she'd learned, were just people who finally chose hope over fear. The marriage broker's words still echoed. He specifically requested someone pure, untouched. It's cultural, spiritual. Don't ask questions you don't want answered. The money they'd offered could pay off her sister's medical bills, secure her nephew's college fund, and give her something she'd never had, a purpose beyond survival. So she'd said yes to the impossible, to an impossible offer that has never happened in the history of womanhood. She set the iron down and touched the dress. Tomorrow she'd walk down an aisle. Tomorrow she'd become someone's wife. Even if that someone was a monster, she wouldn't care. At least she would relieve herself of the shame of being lonely. 7,000 miles away, in a glass tower overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, Gun-jeon-pyo Kang stood motionless in his penthouse, staring at a photograph. The woman in it was old, plain, ordinary, perfect. "You're really going through with this lunacy?" his lieutenant, Dae-sung, asked from the doorway, voice tight with disapproval. Gun-jeon-pyo didn't turn. At 29, he'd already buried more men than most soldiers. His nickname, the Ghost, wasn't because he was invisible. It was because once he marked you, you were already dead. His face was beautiful in the way sharp things are beautiful, all angles and cold precision, with eyes that revealed nothing. But those eyes hadn't left Sandra Wilfred's photograph for 3 days. The prophecy was clear, Gun-jeon-pyo said softly, his English flawless, but tinged with something ancient. A woman of pure spirit, untouched by corruption. Only she can cleanse the blood curse on our family. It's superstition. You don't actually believe. My grandfather believed it when the fortune teller warned him. My father believed it when the cancer took him at 43. My brother believed it before the rival syndicate gutted him in broad daylight. Gun-jeon-pyo finally turned, and Dae-sung took an involuntary step back. "I'm 29, Dae-sung. Every Kang man dies before 35, every single one, for 6 generations. So you buy yourself a 65-year-old virgin bride from America." Dae-sung's laugh was bitter. "The other families already think you've lost your mind." "Good," Gun-jeon-pyo said, slipping the photograph into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. "Let them think I'm crazy. Lunatics are unpredictable. Unpredictable men stay alive." He walked to the window, watching the city pulse below, a city he controlled through fear, blood, and perfect calculation. But control was slipping. His rivals smelled weakness. His own lieutenants questioned his sanity. And somewhere inside him, in a place he thought long dead, something whispered that this strange, impossible woman might be the only real thing he'd ever chosen. He said, "Prepare the plane. I'm getting married."
Hi, drama lovers. It's good to have you on this fresh episode. I couldn't get my eyes off the sad, emotional, and romantic story of Sandra Wilfred. Do you think it will be possible for her to find a long-lasting love or another twist of fate she can't escape? Because what happens next will haunt you. If you're ready to go down this rabbit hole with me, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'm bringing you another story that'll mess with your head, just like this one. Now, let's dive in. The ceremony was smaller than Sandra expected. No crowd, no cameras, just a private chapel in a Baltimore hotel suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. The officiant was a tired-looking Korean man who spoke in monotone. Dae-sung stood as witness, his jaw clenched and barely concealed disgust. And Gun-jun-pyo stood at the altar in a black suit that probably cost more than her car, looking at her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Sandra's knees trembled as she walked toward him. The dress suddenly felt too tight, too white, too much like a lie. What am I doing? But then Gun-jun-pyo extended his hand, and she took it. His palm was warm, solid, real. "You came," he said softly, and there was something raw in his voice, surprise, maybe even relief. "I keep my promises," Sandra replied, her own voice steadier than she felt. His eyes searched hers. Up close, he was almost unbearably young, smooth skin, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that hadn't yet learned how to smile naturally. But his eyes were ancient, haunted. "I know what people think," he said quietly as the officiant droned on in Korean, "that I'm insane, that this is some sick game." "Are you? Insane?" A ghost of something, pain, humor, flickered across his face. "Probably, but I've never lied about what I am, Sandra Wilfred. I'm a killer, a criminal, a man with blood on his hands and a curse in his bones." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I chose you, not randomly, not cruelly. I looked at 100 files and I chose you." "Why?" "Because you have kind eyes," he said simply, "and I've never had anything kind." The words hit Sandra like a fist to her chest. In that moment, she saw past the Mafia boss, past the danger, past the impossible age gap. She saw a boy who'd been raised in violence and darkness, reaching for the only light he could find, even if that light was a 65-year-old woman who gave up on fairy tales decades ago. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said in English. Gun-jun-pyo leaned down, so far down she felt the absurdity of their height difference, and pressed his lips to her forehead. Not her mouth, her forehead. It was the gentlest thing Sandra had ever felt. "Thank you," he whispered against her skin, "for giving me a chance at something real." And then the room tilted. It started as a flutter in her chest, hummingbird wings against her ribcage, then heat spreading through her veins like wildfire. Her vision blurred at the edges, and suddenly she couldn't feel her legs. "Gun-jun-pyo," she gasped. He caught her before she hit the ground, his arms impossibly strong. "Sandra! Sandra!" The world was spinning. Her body felt heavy, foreign, wrong. She tried to move her legs, but they wouldn't respond, wouldn't obey. "I can't," panic seized her throat. "I can't feel my legs. I can't, Gun-jun-pyo, I can't walk." His face went white.
not with fear, with fury. Daesung, lock down the building now! Someone poisoned her. Someone poisoned my wife. Boss, how could anyone? The champagne, the flowers, the fucking air, I don't care. Gun-jun-pyo lifted Sandra like she weighed nothing, his voice dropping to something deadly and cold. Find who did this and bring me their hearts while they're still beating. Sandra's vision tunneled. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Gun-jun-pyo's face above hers. No longer cold, no longer controlled. Terrified. Stay with me, he pleaded, and she felt something wet hit her cheek. A tear. His tear. Please, Sandra, I just found you. Stay with me. But the darkness swallowed her whole. Sandra awoke to the smell of antiseptic and jasmine. Her eyelids felt like they'd been glued shut. Every breath was a labor, and her legs, God, her legs, still felt like dead weight attached to a body that no longer belonged to her. Don't try to move, Gun-jun-pyo's voice came, close, exhausted. She forced her eyes open. She was in a bedroom, massive, minimalist, all white walls and dark wood, expensive, foreign. Through the window, she could see unfamiliar city lights. Where? Her throat was sandpaper. Where am I? Seoul. Gun-jun-pyo sat in a chair beside the bed, still wearing his wedding suit, now rumpled and stained. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in however long she'd been unconscious. I brought you to my private medical facility, the best doctors in Asia. My legs. Paralyzed. Temporarily. His voice was flat, clinical, but his hands were clenched into fists on his knees. You were poisoned with a nerve agent, slow-acting, designed to look like a stroke or natural collapse, untraceable unless you know exactly what to look for. Sandra's heart hammered. Who? My enemies, rivals who think I've gone soft, marrying an old woman for superstition instead of power. His laugh was bitter, broken. They wanted to humiliate me, show that I can't even protect my own wife on our wedding day. Wife. The word sounded absurd, impossible. You should annul it, Sandra whispered. This isn't... I'm not what you need. I'm just a liability now, a crippled old woman you barely know. Gun-jun-pyo's head snapped up, and the look in his eyes silenced her. Don't, he said, voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. He stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. You think I don't know what people say? That I'm crazy, obsessed, that I married you because of some insane prophecy? He whirled to face her. Maybe I am crazy, but you know what the prophecy actually said, Sandra? She shook her head. The pure heart will either save the ghost or bury him beside his fathers. He moved closer, his intensity almost frightening. You're not just some good luck charm. You're my test, the universe asking me one question. Can a monster choose something other than blood? I don't have any power. You have everything. His voice cracked. You spent 65 years being good, being kind, putting everyone before yourself until there was nothing left. No husband, no children, no grand love story, just a woman who gave and gave until she was invisible. He knelt beside the bed, and for the first time, Sandra saw tears on his face. I've spent 29 years being a killer, and in one night you made me feel like maybe I could be something else. Gun-jun-pyo, they poisoned you to get to me, and now you want me to throw you away like you're nothing? He took her hand, gently, carefully, like she was made of glass. I won't do it. I won't prove them right. I won't become the monster who abandons the only good thing he's ever touched. Sandra stared at him, this beautiful, broken boy playing at being a man, trying so hard to be something other than what he was raised to be. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, so am I. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, a 65-year-old paralyzed bride and a 29-year-old mafia boss, both terrified, both trapped, both refusing to let go. We figure this out together, or we burn together. Your choice." Sandra thought about all the years she'd played it safe, all the chances she'd never taken. "Together," she whispered. His grip tightened. "Together." The days blurred into a strange, suspended reality. Gunjin-pyo moved Sandra into his private wing of the compound, a fortress disguised as a luxury penthouse with guards at every entrance and medical equipment humming softly in the corner of her room. Physical therapists came twice daily, working her useless legs with clinical efficiency, while she bit back tears of frustration. But it was Gunjin-pyo who stayed. Every morning he carried her to the floor-to-ceiling windows so she could watch the sunrise over Seoul. Every evening he read to her, first in Korean, then switching to English when she asked what the words meant. And every night he slept in the chair beside her bed, his gun within reach, his sleep fractured and vigilant. "You don't have to babysit me," Sandra said one afternoon as he helped her sit up, arranging pillows behind her back with surprising gentleness. "Don't you have a criminal empire to run?" "I'm running it from here." He gestured to the laptop on the desk, the phones that rang constantly, the hushed conversations he had in rapid Korean just outside her door. "My enemies wanted me distracted. Instead, they've made me focused." His jaw tightened. "Every hour you can't walk is another hour I'm hunting them." That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be true. He sat on the edge of the bed, close but not touching. "The antidote exists. A chemist in Busan created the poison, which means he created the cure. My men are negotiating." "Negotiating," Sandra repeated. "That's a nice word for what you people do." Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, maybe, or recognition. "You're right. We don't negotiate. We take, we threaten, we kill." He looked down at his hands, smooth, unmarked, deceptively clean. "These hands have ended 17 lives, Sandra, personally, not counting the orders I've given." She should have been horrified, should have recoiled. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. He froze, staring at their joined fingers like he was seeing a miracle. "Why did you really choose me?" Sandra asked softly. "The truth this time, not the prophecy, not the kind eyes, the real reason." Gunjun-pyo was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Because I'm dying. Maybe not from a curse, maybe just from this life, but I'm dying inside, piece by piece, and I wanted," he swallowed hard, "I wanted to know what it felt like to be near someone who hadn't been poisoned by this world yet, someone who could look at me and not see a monster first." "I see the monster," Sandra said honestly. His face crumpled. "But I also see the boy who reads to me, who carries me to watch sunrises, who cries when he thinks I'm asleep." She squeezed his hand. "I spent my whole life being careful, Gunjun-pyo, being appropriate, doing what made sense, and you know what it got me? 65 years alone." Her voice cracked. "Maybe marrying you was crazy. Maybe this whole thing is insane. But for the first time in my life, I feel seen." Gunjun-pyo's eyes were wet. "I don't deserve. None of us deserve anything. We just decide what we're willing to fight for." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he pressed his forehead against hers, an echo of their wedding day kiss, but deeper, more desperate. "I'll get you the cure, Sandra," he promised. "Whatever it costs, whoever I have to burn, you'll walk again, Sandra, I swear it." "And then what?" she whispered. "Then we figure out how to live together." And for the first time since the poison stole her legs, Sandra felt something stronger than fear. She felt hope. The nightmare came on the 8th night. Sandra woke gasping, her useless legs tangled in sheets, her heart racing with phantom memories of falling, never hitting the ground. She couldn't even sit up without help, couldn't escape her own terror. "Sandra!" Gun-jun-pyo was there instantly, hands on her shoulders, anchoring her to reality. Breathe. You're safe. Breathe. I dreamed I was walking, I was running, and then I just forgot how, like my body forgot it ever knew. He pulled her against his chest, and she didn't resist. His heart beat steady and strong beneath her cheek, young and alive, while hers felt ancient and failing. "Tell me something," Gun-jun-pyo said softly, stroking her silver hair. "Tell me why a woman like you never married, never even," he hesitated, "never even let someone close." Sandra closed her eyes. The truth was buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it wasn't there. "I was engaged once," she whispered. 22 years old. His name was David. He was a doctor, handsome, smart, from a good family. Everyone said we were perfect together. Gun-jun-pyo's hand stilled. "What happened?" "He found out I wanted to wait until marriage. I was raised in the church, believed in doing things right, and I thought he loved me enough to wait 6 months." Her laugh was broken glass. "2 weeks before the wedding, I found him in bed with my maid of honor. When I confronted him, you know what he said?" Gun-jun-pyo's arms tightened around her. "He said, 'I'm not spending my life with a frigid old virgin who thinks her purity makes her special. You're not worth waiting for, Sandra.'" The words still burned after 43 years. "So I gave him back the ring, and I decided right then if being pure made me worthless, then I'd stay pure out of spite. I'd wait for a man who saw value in it, who saw value in me. Sandra. But he never came." She pulled back to look at Gun-jun-pyo through tear-blurred eyes. "Decades passed. I worked, I served, I smiled, and I pretended it didn't matter, that I didn't lie awake at night wondering if David was right, if I was just a stubborn fool clinging to something nobody wanted." "He was wrong," Gun-jun-pyo said fiercely. "He was a coward and a fool, and he was wrong." "Was he? Look at me, Gun-jun-pyo. 65 years old, paralyzed, married to a stranger because he needed a virgin for a prophecy." "Stop!" Gun-jun-pyo cupped her face in his hands, and the tenderness in his touch shattered something inside her. "You want to know the real reason I chose you? Why I looked at 100 files and kept coming back to yours?" She nodded, unable to speak. "Because every other woman's file listed accomplishments, status, connections, things they'd taken from the world. But your file," his thumb wiped away her tears, "your file listed 42 years of service, patients saved, families comforted, a sister you supported through cancer, a nephew you put through school. You gave and never asked for anything back." His voice cracked. "I've spent my life taking, Sandra, destroying. And when I saw you, this woman who survived heartbreak and loneliness and kept choosing kindness anyway, I thought maybe if someone like you could look at someone like me and not run." He didn't finish, didn't need to. "We're both so broken," Sandra whispered. "I know." He pressed his forehead to hers again. "But maybe broken pieces can still fit together. Maybe that's all love really is. 2 people damaged in complementary ways." Outside, Seoul glittered in the darkness. Inside, 2 impossible people held each other like the world was ending. And somewhere in Busan, a chemist was making a choice that would change everything. Have you ever felt like your past defined you? Like old wounds made you unworthy of new love? Share your story below. Sometimes our deepest scars are exactly what make us ready for real connection. The antidote arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by 3 of Gun-jun-pyo's men who looked like they'd been through war. They had.
Ganjun-pyo didn't tell Sandra the details, didn't mention the chemist's severed fingers, the burning laboratory, or the rival gang members who would never threaten anyone again. He just brought her the small vial of amber liquid and said, "It's done." The doctors administered it slowly, warning that nerve regeneration would take days, maybe weeks, that she needed patience. But by Thursday, Sandra could wiggle her toes. By Saturday, she could bend her knees, and on Sunday morning, with Ganjun-pyo's arms around her waist and tears streaming down both their faces, Sandra Wilfred stood. "I've got you," Ganjun-pyo whispered, taking her full weight as her legs trembled like a newborn foal's. "I've got you." "I'm standing. Ganjun-pyo, I'm standing." He laughed, a real laugh, young and unguarded and full of wonder. "You're standing. You're gonna walk. You're gonna be okay." They stayed like that for 20 minutes, swaying slightly, her legs learning to remember, his arms refusing to let go. And when she finally had to sit, exhausted but victorious, Ganjun-pyo knelt in front of her and kissed both her knees. "Thank you," he said against her skin. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for giving me a reason not to." Something shifted between them after that. The fear lifted, the desperation eased, and in its place grew something neither of them expected: joy. Ganjun-pyo started teaching her Korean during her physical therapy sessions, laughing when she butchered the pronunciation, rewarding her progress with small gifts: a jade bracelet, a silk scarf, a first edition of her favorite book that must have cost a fortune. "You don't have to buy me things," Sandra protested. "I know. I want to. I've spent millions on weapons and bribes and blood money. Let me spend something on making you smile." Sandra started asking about his life, not the violence, but the boy beneath it. His favorite food, kimchi jjigae, made the way his grandmother used to make it. His secret dream, to own a bookstore by the sea, far from Seoul and syndicate politics. The scar on his rib cage, a knife fight when he was 16, protecting a friend who'd been marked for death. "You protected someone?" Sandra asked, tracing the raised tissue with gentle fingers. "Once upon a time, I tried to be good," Ganjun-pyo said quietly, "before I learned that good men die first in my world." "Maybe you've been good all along, just in ways that don't look pretty." He stared at her like she'd handed him absolution. One evening, as Sandra took her first unassisted steps across the bedroom, shaky but determined, Ganjun-pyo put on music, old American jazz, scratchy and warm. "What are you doing?" Sandra laughed as he extended his hand. "We never had a first dance," he said. "At the wedding. We were too busy with you collapsing and me hunting poisoners. I can barely walk, so we'll barely dance." His smile was crooked, boyish. "Please, Sandra, let me have this." She took his hand. They moved in the smallest circle, her hands on his shoulders, his arms supporting her weight, barely swaying to the music. It was clumsy and imperfect and nothing like a real dance. It was the most beautiful moment of Sandra's life. "I'm falling for you," Ganjun-pyo whispered against her hair. "Is that crazy? Am I insane?" Sandra thought about David, about 43 years of loneliness, about a wedding day that ended in paralysis and terror, about a boy king who'd burned down half of Busan to save her. "Completely insane," she whispered back. "And I'm falling too." He held her tighter, and they danced in the shadows, two impossible people creating something real from the ruins of their lives. Outside, Seoul pulsed with danger and darkness. Inside, something pure was blooming. The call came at 3 a.m. Sandra woke to Ganjun-pyo's voice, low, rapid Korean laced with barely controlled fury. She'd learned enough of the language now to catch words: betrayal, family, choice. He hung up, and the silence was deafening. "Ganjun-pyo, Sandra sat up, her legs strong enough now to move on their own. "What's wrong?" He stood at the window, backlit by Seoul's neon glow, his shoulders rigid. When he finally turned, his face was the mask she'd seen on their wedding day, cold, empty, controlled. The warmth was gone. "The council has given me an ultimatum," he said flatly. "Annul the marriage and take a proper wife from the Kim family, unite the syndicates, or they remove me from power. Permanently." Sandra's heart stopped. What does permanently mean? It means they'll kill me. Probably slowly, definitely publicly. His laugh was hollow. Apparently, marrying a 65-year-old foreign woman and going to war over her poisoning has made me a liability. They think I've gone soft, weak, and I'm choosing sentiment over strategy. "So annul it," Sandra said, even as the words cut her throat. "I told you from the beginning I'm not worth dying for." "Don't," his voice cracked. "Don't make this harder." "Gunjin Pyo, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable." He slammed his fist against the window, and Sandra flinched. "I'm 29 years old. I've built an empire on fear and blood. I have power, money, connections that span continents. And you know what? I'd burn it all, every last piece, if I could just have one normal life with you." "But you can't," Sandra said, tears streaming. "That's not how the world works. You can't unmake what you are." "What I am?" Gunjun Pyo moved closer, and she saw the anguish in his eyes. "Tell me, Sandra, tell me, because I don't know anymore. Am I the monster who kills without hesitation? Am I the fool who fell for a woman old enough to be her grandmother? Am I the boy who still believes in prophecies and curses and the possibility of redemption? You're the man who saved me, who gave me 6 weeks of feeling cherished and seen and alive for the first time in my life, and I love you for it. God help me, I love you." She stood, her legs steady now, and crossed to him. "I love you enough to let you go, to let you live." He cupped her face, his hands trembling. "What if I don't want to live without you? Then you're a fool." "I know." He kissed her, desperately, hungrily, like a drowning man gasping for air. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted like goodbye. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "The Kim daughter is beautiful, connected, appropriate, everything a syndicate wife should be." His voice broke. "And I'll hate every second I'm with her because she isn't you." "Gunjun Pyo." He stepped back, and the distance felt like death. "I need you to go, Sandra, back to Baltimore, tonight. Daesung will escort you, provide protection, set you up with whatever you need." He stepped back, and the distance felt like death. "So that's it?" Sandra's voice shook with fury and heartbreak. "You make me fall in love with you, make me believe in fairy tales again, and then you just send me away?" "I'm keeping you alive," he said. "It's the only good thing I've ever done." "It's the cruelest thing you've ever done," I spat, "and I'll hate you for it." "Good. Hate me, but live." He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the vast penthouse. Sandra collapsed on the bed, her newly healed legs curling beneath her, and screamed into the silence. The fairy tale was over. The monster had won. Sandra didn't leave. Daesung came at dawn with plane tickets and a briefcase full of cash. She looked at him, this hard man who'd sneered at her on their wedding day, and said simply, "No." "Mrs. Kang, the boss gave explicit orders." "I don't care what your boss ordered." Sandra stood, her 65-year-old spine straight as steel. "I didn't survive 65 years alone, paralysis and poison, just to run away the moment things get hard. You don't understand what you're dealing with, the council. The council is full of frightened men clinging to power." Sandra's voice was sharp as a scalpel. "And I'm a woman who has nothing left to lose except the man I love, so either help me or get out of my way." Dae-sung stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. He said you'd say that, Dae-sung admitted. He also said if you refuse to leave, I should lock you in the car and take you anyway. And will you? Dae-sung set down the briefcase. My grandmother was like you, stubborn, fierce, loved a man the world told her was wrong for her. His expression softened. She fought for 40 years to keep him alive, and you know what? She did. He died at 83, in his sleep, holding her hand. He moved toward the door. The council meets at the Grand Joseon Hotel tonight, 8 p.m. Min-jun will announce his decision then. How do I get in? You don't. It's invitation only, heavily guarded. He paused at the threshold. But the head of security owes me a favor, and I happen to think the boss deserves a chance to be happy before this life kills him. He left the room key card on the table. Sandra waited until he was gone, then sat down and began to plan. Min-jun stood in his dressing room, adjusting his tie for the third time. The suit was black, funeral black. Fitting, since he was about to bury the only real thing he'd ever had. You look like hell, Dae-sung said from the doorway. I feel worse. Min-jun's hands shook as he tried to knot the silk. Is she gone? Is she safe? She's gone, Dae-sung lied smoothly, on a plane back to Baltimore, protected, provided for. Min-jun closed his eyes and a tear slid down his cheek. Good, that's good. Is it? Dae-sung challenged, because you look like a man who just cut out his own heart. Better my heart than her life. Min-jun finally got the tie right. The Kim girl, what's her name again? Jiwoo. Jiwoo, Min-jun tested the name. It felt like ash in his mouth. She's what, 24? Beautiful? Obedient? Everything you don't want, Dae-sung said quietly. Everything I need to stay alive and in power, Min-jun turned to face him. Tell me I'm doing the right thing. Tell me I'm not making the biggest mistake of my life. Dae-sung looked at him, really looked at him, at the young man who'd been raised to be a monster, who'd found one pure thing in a lifetime of darkness and was about to sacrifice it for survival. I can't tell you that, boss, Dae-sung said, because I don't think you are. Min-jun's composure cracked. Then what do I do? How do I choose between staying alive and actually living? I don't know, but... Dae-sung checked his watch. You have 2 hours to figure it out. Min-jun nodded, straightening his shoulders, becoming the ghost again, cold, controlled, empty. But as he walked toward the car that would take him to the council, to Jiwoo, to a loveless future that stretched out like a prison sentence, he thought of Sandra, her silver hair catching morning light, her rare, brilliant smile, the way she'd looked at him not like a monster or a lunatic, but like a man worth saving. I'm falling too, she whispered in his arms. Min-jun closed his eyes and made his choice. He just prayed it was the right one. The Grand Joseon Hotel ballroom was filled with Korea's most dangerous men, syndicate heads in expensive suits, lieutenants with cold eyes, the Kim family delegation with Jiwoo at their center, porcelain perfect and utterly lifeless. Min-jun stood at the podium, the weight of expectation crushing him. Honored Council, he began in Korean, his voice steady. I stand before you to address concerns about my leadership, my judgment, my recent choices. The room was silent, hungry. You believe I've gone soft, that marrying Sandra Wilfred, a 65-year-old American woman, was the act of a lunatic, evidence of weakness. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. You're right, Min-jun said. The murmurs stopped. I am weak enough to care about someone beyond myself, weak enough to fight for something other than power, weak enough to... The ballroom doors burst open. Sandra Wilfred walked in. She wore a deep burgundy dress that Dae-sung had somehow procured. Her silver hair was down, framing her beautiful lined face, and she walked, steady, strong, unstoppable, straight toward the podium. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Gun-jan-pyo stared at her like she was a ghost. "Sandra, what are you? You were supposed to be on a plane, hiding?" Sandra reached the podium, and her voice rang clear through the ballroom. "I'm 65 years old. I've hidden my whole life. I'm done." She turned to face the council, this room full of killers and criminals, and she was magnificent. "My name is Sandra Wilfred," she said in halting but determined Korean, words she'd made Dae-sung teach her on the drive over, "and I am Gun-jan-pyo Kang's wife." "This is outrageous," one of the council members started. "You want to know if he's weak?" Sandra switched to English, forcing them to listen. "He's the strongest man I've ever met, strong enough to choose love in a loveless world, strong enough to save a dying woman he barely knew, strong enough to admit he wants something more than blood and power." She looked at Gun-jan-pyo, and her eyes were blazing. "You call him a lunatic? Maybe he is, but I'd rather have 1 year with a lunatic who loves me than a lifetime with a powerful man who feels nothing." "Sandra," Gun-jan-pyo breathed, tears streaming down his face, "you shouldn't have come. They'll kill us both." "Then we die together," she said simply. She took his hand, and her grip was iron. "I didn't survive poison and paralysis just to lose you to fear. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I'm done letting the world tell me I'm not enough." She turned back to the council. "So here's what's going to happen. You can kill us both right now, make yourselves murderers of an old woman and your own leader. Let the world see how strong and honorable you are." Her voice dripped with contempt. "Or you can accept that Gun-jan-pyo Kang makes his own choices, that he's powerful enough to marry whoever he wants, and that if you try to hurt either of us," she smiled, and it was fierce, "then you'll have to answer to a 65-year-old woman with nothing to lose and everything to fight for." The silence was absolute. Then, from the back of the room, someone started clapping. Dae-sung. Then another lieutenant. Then another. The Kim family delegation sat frozen, humiliated, but the rest of the room, these hard men who'd seen everything, looked at Sandra Wilfred with something like respect. The council head stood slowly. "This is unprecedented." "So was surviving 6 generations of death curses," Gun-jan-pyo said, finding his voice. He pulled Sandra close. "Maybe that's what she is, my unprecedented miracle." The council studied them, this impossible couple, and finally nodded. "The council accepts your marriage, for now." It wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was a chance. Gun-jan-pyo turned to Sandra, cupped her face, and kissed her in front of everyone, deep and desperate and full of promise. "You're insane," he whispered against her lips. "I learned from the best," she whispered back. 6 months later, the bookstore was small, tucked into a quiet corner of Busan, overlooking the sea. Sandra arranged flowers in the window, while Gun-jan-pyo shelved new arrivals. His hair was longer now, his suits replaced with comfortable sweaters. He still had guards. Dae-sung refused to let him go completely unprotected, but they stayed outside, watching the waves. "Customer," Sandra called, and Gun-jan-pyo looked up to see a young woman browsing the poetry section. He smiled, that real, unguarded smile he'd learned from his wife, and went to help.
That evening, they sat on the small balcony, watching the sunset paint the ocean gold. "Do you miss it?" Sandra asked, her head on his shoulder. "The power, the control?" Gunjan considered. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but then I look at you and I remember what real wealth is." Sandra kissed his temple. "Sentimental lunatic." "Your sentimental lunatic." "Mine," she agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, a 65-year-old woman and a 29-year-old man who chose each other against all logic, all reason, all expectation. The prophecy was right all. The pure heart hadn't just saved the ghost, she taught him to live. When was the last time you chose love over logic, connection over safety, hope over fear? Sandra and Gunjan remind us that the bravest thing we can do is fight for what makes us feel alive, no matter how impossible it seems. Drop a comment sharing a time you took a leap of faith for love. Your story might inspire someone else to be brave. Thank you for watching this story to the end. I know you enjoyed this story. You will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.